Hey, Coach, I want to welcome you to the Liability Responsible for Inefficient Coaching video webinar. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. And I promise you, this will not be a waste of your time. One of the things that we practice here at the Purpose Development Institute is that we practice not duplicating something that you are already doing. So, what you're going to see in this video webinar, you're going to see something that you're not doing, but it's going to be extremely important for your athletic program to be able to address whatever this deficiency is here as we discuss the liability responsible for inefficient coaching. Now, let me just kind of start with this thought, and that is that you can get more out of student athletes by cracking the code of purpose than you can by cracking the whip. And as you can see in the picture here, you can see a coach just basically screaming at the top of his voice to crack the whip to get the student athletes to perform, whether it be within athletics or whether it be within academics. That's just our method of operation that we have developed, in the coaching practice. But what we've done here at the Purpose Development Institute is that we created a model to help you understand how to crack the code of purpose so that now you can work with a model that's going to be more efficient than the model that you have been using for all of these years. So let's roll up our sleeves, make sure you have a pen, piece of paper, take copious notes, coach, and let's dive deep. And let's look at how this is going to be important on two fronts. And that is how you coach is important for performance between and outside the lines. See, here's the deal, coach. You want to make sure that you can contribute in a very positive way toward wins in your win column, not just between the lines, but outside the lines as well. You want the student athletes to have those small wins outside the lines. And again, having a more efficient model is going to be extremely important for that because if you don't have the right model, then the risk is going to be high for the losses in the loss columns between and outside the lines. So who are we? We are the co-founders of the Purpose Development Institute. We're one of those think tanks, with a lot of years researching why people do what they do. Coach, you know who you're working with, but you don't know what you're working with. And that's the reason why we're here as your partner, because we're going to help you understand what you're working with so that you can get more out of what you're working with. So we created the PDI Smart model to explain the deficiencies in student development. See, this is going to give you a better understanding as to what you're working with when it comes to student athletes so that now you can address those deficiencies and be able to help student athletes reach their highest growth potential. So let's talk a little bit about our model. It identified recurring themes that exposes the role of purpose in helping student athletes grow from challenges in their college experience. So here's the deal, coach. Purpose has a role in athletics and outside of athletics. It has a very important role. And without this model, you're working with an inefficient model to incorporate purpose in that process. You want purpose to be involved in sports. You want purpose to be involved in academic achievement. But without this model, it's difficult. So as a result of that, you're going to have student athletes who don't understand how to take those challenges that they're going to have between and outside the line and use those challenges to reach their highest growth potential. And that's the reason why this model is so important. So we made it very simple for you to understand this model, coach. There's a lot of research behind this, but we made it simple. Each theme is described as the 4 purpose development checkpoints identified by the 4 colors of the triangles. All you have to remember are the colors of the triangle, coach, because we want to keep this simple for you. So when student athletes have a weak command for the 4 checkpoints, they will struggle showing up to be the best version of themselves between and outside the lines. And coach, I'm sure that you would agree is that you want them to be a better version. You want them to be the better version between and outside the lines. But you got to make sure that you're working with a model that's going to help them achieve that. And you want to make sure that they have a strong command for the 4 checkpoints. And that's what we're going to explore throughout this presentation. Now, coach, here's what I want to challenge you with. I want you to strip away everything you know about a student athlete because this thought is important by Mr. Stephen Covey. He stated, we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. So the student athletes in your program, guess what, coach? They are spiritual beings having a human experience. You can't forget that, coach, because if you forget that, that's going to work against you, coach. It's going to work against your athletic program. And that's the reason why building a partnership with the PDI is going to be extremely important because we can assist you with that one statement right there, coach, which is probably one of the most important statements that you're going to be able to embrace as a coach, and that is you're working with spiritual beings having a human experience. Now, without purpose development, the human experience will turn into a human experiment. And coach, this is where many of your student athletes are at. They are engaged in what we call the human experiment. They're trying to find meaning in life. They're trying so many things, specifically when they get to college. They're trying so many things to try to find out what this meaning in life is all about. So, coach, you want to make sure that your athletic program can be in a very powerful position to contribute toward them finding meaning in sports and meaning outside of sports. Well, why is that important? Because it's going to contribute toward wins in the win columns and minimize the risk of losses in the loss column. That's where you want to be, coach. And that's the reason why this is extremely important. So let's look at some objectives. Number one, we're going to identify the liability responsible for undermining growth potential. Connect the checkpoints to the liability. Discuss how the purpose business eliminates the liability. So here's the deal, coach. It is important for you to realize that you are in the people business. I know that you're probably thinking that, yeah, I'm in the sports business, but I have some news for you, coach. You're in the people business. So you got to begin to start thinking differently. And that's the reason why this presentation is going to be important for you, because it's going to give you the insight on how to think differently about being in the people business. So to get the most out of the people business, you must embrace what is known in purpose development as the source root analysis. Now, don't stop the video. Don't throw it down and say, oh, okay, I've had enough. This is extremely important. This is one of the most important coaching strategies that you're going to ever participate in, because it's the source root of why people do what they do, coach. So it's important for you to be able to understand this. So here's how we define it. It's a detailed analysis of the Hebrew letters to identify the codes for extracting purpose out of the human experience or the college experience. See, there are codes, that we can use to extract purpose out of our experiences in life. And when we don't have those codes, it creates frustration. And the last thing that you want, coach, is a bunch of frustrated student athletes or frustrated coaches. That's the reason why this source root analysis is going to be extremely important, because it's going to minimize the frustration from the human experience or the college experience, in this case with the student athletes. So the first Hebrew letter that we're going to deal with, the only one that we're going to deal with in this particular presentation, is called the letter Hey. It's used to reveal the liability responsible for student athletes' poor response to coaching. And I'm sure that you have some that's on different ends of the spectrum. Some respond well, some don't respond well. But we want to make sure that we can help them all increase their response. And this letter reveals why that response is not what it should be, why they are slow to respond to advice. They're slow to respond to coaching. And the slow response is revealed in this fifth letter of the Hebrew alphabet that explain the thought, speech, and actions, or how the thought, speech, and actions are connected to the personal growth gap. That's what you see right here, coach. This is called the personal growth gap. You're working with this. This is the gap that you're dealing with, coach. This gap can either work for you or it can work against you. Now, this is the reason why it's important for you to understand this gap. I know that you're now in the era of the NIL ruling, name, image, and likeness. Some of these kids, are making more money than the coaches, and many coaches are finding it difficult to coach these kids. Well, it's difficult to coach these kids because of this gap, because of the personal growth gap, coach. They are so far behind in their growth potential to handle the finances that they are making, so it makes it difficult for you to coach them. So this gap is going to work against your program. You can have the best NIL training on campus or in any college in America, but if you don't address this gap, coach, then this gap is going to work with you. It's going to work against you, because one bad decision because of the lack of growth potential can ruin their NIL deal. And just in case your organization, your institution have an NIL deal, it can ruin the NIL deal for everyone. And that's the reason why it's important for you to understand the personal growth gap. So the horizontal line in the letter Hey represents the thoughts, because thoughts are constant. It's hard to stop thinking. Some people practice and they can master that through meditation, but thoughts are constant, and that's important for you to understand that. And then secondly, speech is up and down. In other words, there are times we talk too much and there are times that we talk too little. And then we have the actions. And actions are disconnected, as you can see here on the screen. All right. This is where, we are having struggles at. We have a struggle because there's a disconnect between the thoughts up here, okay, the speech over here, and then the actions. All right. There's a disconnect. In other words, student athletes are having a difficult time doing what they're thinking and speaking, or doing what you are thinking and speaking. Okay. Because that gap in their growth potential, we call it the intuitive growth, is a lagging indicator. And this is the reason why it's a lagging indicator, is because of that gap. So the gap is the liability. I'm going to say it again. The gap is the liability in your athletic program. This is important. You might want to make note of this. Tell this to every coach, athletic director. If you are the athletic director, make sure you tell this to every coach. This is the gap. See, this gap is the difference between wins in the win columns and losses in the loss column. I'm going to say this again. See, the coach that's able to close this gap is a coach that's able to create a culture the way he can get more wins in the win columns versus the losses in the loss columns. And this is the reason why it's important for you to understand how to close this gap. So speakers motivate to close the gap. Preachers preach to close the gap. Coaches provide accountability to close the gap. So we have so many different ways, various ways of closing the gap, but there's only one efficient way. You have to have a model. So if you fail to lean into a new level of genius for closing the personal growth gap, the risk would be high for student athletes with great intentions, but no real commitment to do what you are thinking. See, here's the deal. The commitment comes from closing the gap. If we close the gap, the narrower, the more we can close that gap, the more we can increase commitment to showing up to be the best, commitment to reaching the highest growth potential. So the checkpoints, they are the genius for closing the personal growth gap. And there you are. There's the triangle again. That's how you close the gap, coach. This is the difference between wins in the win column, losses in the loss column, is that you have to integrate this model into your athletic program. See, there are many coaching programs out there, many athletic programs, they don't have this model in the athletic program. So as a result, that gap is always working against them. So to help student athletes show up and be the best, you must know their position on all 4 checkpoints. See, you need to know their position. Number one, you need to know your position. And if you don't know your position on the 4 checkpoints, how in the world can you help them in their position on the 4 checkpoints? So this training is not just important for them, but the training here at the PDI is important for you as well, coach. So first checkpoint, they must have a clear path for rebuilding and reconstruction relationship between who they are and their environment. So coach, I need you to be honest with me. What mechanism do you have in place to help them rebuild the reconstruction relationships between who they are and their environment? Coach, and if you're being honest, you don't have anything. That's the reason why you need to partner with the PDI coaching community. You need to be a part of the PDI training resources that we have here at our organization, because we're the experts in making sure that this checkpoint is releasing those reconstruction relationships between who they are and their environment. Number 2, they must have skills to reverse the effects of purpose deficit disorder. So, coach, be honest with me again. What mechanism do you have in place to reverse the effects of PDD? This is probably the first time you're hearing about PDD, so you don't have anything in place for that. But coach, I promise you, it's extremely important, because this PDD is the difference between wins in the win columns, losses in the loss columns. If you don't address PDD, then the risk is going to be high for losses in the loss column instead of wins in the win column. Checkpoint 3, they must have a blueprint for cracking the master purpose code. Coach, what do you have in place? What mechanism do you have in place? Be honest with me, coach, about the blueprint for cracking the master purpose code. See, coach, it's easier to get more out of student athletes by cracking the master purpose code than cracking the whip. You crack the whip, coach, because you don't understand how to crack the master purpose code. We're the experts in helping you do that. Number 4, you must help them bring the two systems of the soul back online to develop the quality for sustaining a strong sense of purpose in the human/college experience. Coach, be honest. What do you have in place, Coach? What do you have in place for this? What do you have in place to bring those two systems of the soul back online? First of all, do you even know what the two systems of the souls are? There are two systems that's responsible for errors in purpose and controlling the narrative. And if those two systems are offline, Coach, then the risk is going to be high for you to have an athletic program with student athletes that make errors in purpose and have no control over the narrative of the human/college experience. So, Coach, you can see the importance. The people business requires developing skills for the purpose business so you can rebuild the structure, integrity, of purpose and close the personal growth gap. Coach, don't you think it's time to do something different? Don't you think it's time for you to now get into the purpose business? I know you think you're in the sports business, but Coach, you're in the people business, which put you in the purpose business so that now you can rebuild that structural integrity and close the personal growth gap. Coach, you understand rebuilding an athletic program. Well, guess what? You have to rebuild the structural integrity of purpose because every student athlete coming into your program, that their structural integrity is not where it needs to be. So you have to have a program, an athletic program, that's real strong in rebuilding that structural integrity so that now you can close that gap that can contribute to wins in the win column. Because if you don't close that gap, then it's going to contribute to losses in the loss column, not just between the lines, but also outside the lines, Coach. So let's define the purpose business. It's the science of discovering purpose beyond what you do for a living so the PDI SMART model can be fully integrated into the college experience or the human experience. Coach, you need an expert to help you fully integrate this model into your athletic program. That's what we do, Coach. We have the training. We have the experts on deck that's able to help you integrate this model. See, the problem is, Coach, you're working with an inefficient model. You need to work with a model that's going to help you be more efficient in rebuilding the structural integrity of purpose. Let me say it like this, Coach. All the wins that you're looking for is hidden in rebuilding the structural integrity of purpose. And if you're working with the wrong model, then how are you going to begin that process, Coach? You know, you're going to have a high risk for losses in the loss column. That's the reason why it's important for you to be in the purpose business. So guess what? Purpose development is that science beyond what people do for a living. We have the largest body of knowledge in the world when it comes to rebuilding the structural integrity of purpose. All right. So it's defined as that ability to rebuild that structural integrity to reach your highest growth potential. So, Coach, even you struggling to reach your highest growth potential. And if you're not growing, then guess what? How can you help the student athletes grow? So, Coach, this is going to be important to help you grow and in turn help the student athlete grow as well as you take those 4 checkpoints in that model and begin to rebuild that structural integrity. So purpose development is the frontline defense against the meaning crisis. Remember, they are looking for meaning and you need a frontline defense. In other words, first of all, I want to congratulate you for being on the front line. But as you understand, the frontline workers, you know, you're working with people who are looking for meaning in life. All right. And because of that, they're in a meaning crisis. So you need to have a frontline defense for that, Coach. And purpose development is your frontline defense. Number 2, purpose development is the only solution for reversing the effects of PDD. You have nothing in place, Coach. So you need purpose development, you know, to reverse the effects of PDD. Here's the deal, Coach. If you do not reverse the effects of PDD in your athletic program, the risk will be high for losses in the loss column instead of wins in the win columns. Purpose development provides the blueprint for cracking the master purpose code. Coach, you got to have a blueprint. You have to have a blueprint for student athletes to show up. We have that blueprint, Coach, for them to show up to be a better version of themselves so that they can show up and prevent you and minimize you having to crack the whip. Because guess what, Coach? You cracked the code of purpose. Purpose development reveals the 2 systems of the soul that are responsible for sustaining meaningful excellence in the human/college experience. Coach, We're the only company in the world that understand how to optimize those two systems that I told you about. There are two systems that's responsible for the errors in purpose and controlling their degrees of purpose, the narrative of purpose. Coach, we're the experts in understanding how to get those systems back online. That's the reason why our research is important for your athletic program, because you have nothing in place to be able to get those systems online. And when you do, coach, you're going to help student athletes reach their highest growth potential. So, coach, in closing, here's a very important thought that you're going to have to remember. And that is, the student athlete's degree of success in the future is dependent on the degree of purpose in their present. Coach, right now, you do not have a model to increase their degree of purpose in the present. So therefore, you minimize their chances of having a high degree of success in the future because you're working with an inefficient model. That's the reason why you need to allow us to come in with our resources to integrate our model into your athletic program so that now they have a model to increase their degree of purpose in the moment. So guess what's going to happen, coach? Your coaching is going to go from inefficient coaching to efficient coaching. You're going to have an athletic program that goes from being inefficient when it comes to helping student athletes reach their highest growth potential to being efficient. You're going to be on the cutting edge, coach, of being able to put your program in the highest place of helping student athletes reach their highest growth potential. So every athletic program needs a purpose development coach to help them rebuild the structural integrity of purpose within their program. Coach, I'm going to say it again. Rebuilding the structural integrity of purpose is the difference between wins in the win columns, losses in the loss column. If you fail to rebuild, coach, then the risk is going to be high for losses in the loss column. But when you rebuild, you're going to have wins in the win columns. You're going to create a culture for wins in the win column. And that's where you want to be, coach. So train with the experts. Train with us and let us integrate that model, the PDI Smart model, into your athletic program. Go to our website, www.pdiatl.com/events. Schedule your free discovery call, coach. Let's have that conversation. This is one conversation that you need to have, coach. You got to have this conversation because guess what? Your career is on the line, coach. Your career is on the line because you know that everyone wants you to produce wins in the win column, not losses in the loss column. So that's the reason why it's important for you to train with the PDI so that we can help you integrate the PDI Smart model. Look forward to working with you, coach.